Section 4 covers clearing and margin. Now, 4.1 looks at client margin calculations. When we're dealing with margin and the buying and selling of options, we are dealing with the selling of options. So when that bullet point under 4.1 says an options exchange participant, to be absolutely accurate, it should read an options exchange participant who is representing an options seller, then goes on, because if your client is selling options, the client will receive the premium but is exposed while the option is live. Because if the option is exercised by the buyer of the option, they will only exercise if they are going to make money. If the buyer is going to make money, the seller will lose money. So the maximum profit a seller of an option can make is the premium they receive, whereas their potential loss can be much greater. And so for that reason, an option exchange participant must operate a system of calling in premium to cover any potential loss. So that said, let's look at the points. The option exchange participant required after the start of the after business period on each trading day to calculate margin in respect of all open positions and delivery obligation of each client. Okay, so on a daily basis, we calculate the margin. And have they got it covered? Well, let's go on. Participant is required to ensure the margin calculated is no less than the amount calculated using prescribed stock exchange methodology. Okay, that's an administrative point. Must ensure each client is promptly notified of the margin and the collateral demanded, because usually it's covered by securities, bonds, or whatever. Could be cash, but it's unlikely. Must ensure each margin is promptly settled by the delivery of the collateral. May treat a client as being default if the collateral is not promptly delivered. May require a client to maintain collateral with the exchange, but in advance of accepting instruction from the client. And that would be a situation where you're taking on a new client. They don't have any history with you and they want to sell options. You may say, okay, I'll take your order, but I want your collateral up front before I accept the instruction. Okay, let's move on. There's a few other bits and pieces there. Now, 4.2 deals with the buyer of options. So here the option exchange participant who is represent the buyer must ensure premium is paid by a client, not so much risk, but they've got to pay the premium when they buy the option, must ensure all amounts are settled in cash promptly, nothing to do with collateral here. May treat the client as being in default if the premium is not paid promptly. You can see sort of a mirror image of the seller. May require a client to pay premium in advance of accepting instructions. Again, possibly a new client. Yes, I'll take your instruction, but I want the money up front. And may set off amounts due from the client against amounts due to the client in respect of margin, settlement, premium, surplus, etc. Now, default of clients. This can be examined, so I'd be aware. If a client is in default on payment of premium or the collateral or in delivery, participant may. So they renege on their obligations. Then the participant, that is the options participant, may not take any further orders, close, give up, exercise some of the client contracts, enter into contracts to hedge risk from default. They're allowed to do all of this in this situation. Make any necessary contract to meet obligations arising as the result of the default. And this is probably the most common one that's examined. Dispose of some or all of the collateral other than cash and use that plus cash to settle amounts due to him with the balance being refunded to the client. I've seen one question where the question was all about the excess cash that you've collected. Who does it get paid to? And the answer was it's refunded to the client. Intraday calls in times of high volatility, you may get more than one margin call, and that covers those points. Section 5, settlement. Well, the exercise of options, we've covered this earlier, and this just takes you through it in more detail. The exercise, when you exercise an option, be it a call or a put option, the exercise instruction goes into DCAS, and that will then generate the underlying transaction, which will take place in CCAS. You can see that in the last bullet point. Exercise stock options are settled by the continuous net settlement system, CNS, in CCAS. Those bullet points just expand the process. Read through them, be familiar with the general process. And then 5.2, payment to the clearinghouse. This is to do with the premiums. So the premiums are paid before you can buy, and then it goes on for onward payment to the sellers. Again, read through those bullet points, but any question should be straightforward if they're tackling those areas. Okay, we're going to leave exchange traded options and move on to OTC, over-the-counter derivatives. Now, page 13 goes into all this detail of what is coming. So the SFC are potentially introducing two new regulated activities, type 11, type 12, which will introduce amendments to type 7 and type 9. But then we go right to the bottom of the page and it says, before the new regulatory regime is fully implemented, intermediaries must inform the SFC if they wish to engage in OTC derivatives, and will have to follow the guidelines that follow. In other words, this is what's coming on page 13, but it's not here yet. And so we're going to carry on doing what we've been doing for a number of years. Now, if you're trading derivatives over the counter, you will have to be licensed for type 1 because you're a dealer. But because there is increased risk with over-the-counter transactions, you must inform the SFC that you are going to carry out OTC derivatives. Now, you don't need any extra license at this point, but they will want to make sure that you are operating the required risk management systems, and that's what this is all about, making sure that the participants are properly covered with regard to risk management. Section 6.2, I'm going to refer you to the last main bullet point, which says the SFC requires licensed or registered persons to have regard to the following matters, and this really just expands what I've just said. You must have a framework of risk management, independent market risk management. And market risk management, that's the risk of the pricing going askew. You have mispriced the product, and as a result, you could lose a lot of money. So independent market risk management, independent credit risk management, because you've got the risk of the counterparty not settling when they should. You don't have that risk when you're trading through the stock exchange, exchange traded options, because the clearinghouse guarantees settlement. You should have in-house expertise and resources, and risk reduction techniques. I've seen this specifically examined. So they can include master agreements, netting arrangements, collateralization of transactions, third-party credit enhancements, that is lists of credit and guarantees, and contingency planning. So a number of points well suited to a 1, 2, 3, 4 type question. So be aware of those. You should have correct valuation and exposure processes. You should have systems and liquidity, funding arrangements, and financial performance. So that's just spelling out the framework that an OTC derivative trader should have in place. Now, the remainder of the material in topic 6 is just expanding on the idea of making sure you have the requisite risk management systems. And at the top of page 15, it's reminding us of the types of risk that a derivative trader is exposed to: credit risk, market risk, liquidity risk, settlement risk. You didn't have that with exchange traded options, you do with OTC derivatives. Operations risk, standard, and then legal risk. You don't have legal risk when you're trading with the exchange because everything is legally tight and everyone has their agreements, but you'll have a contract with the counterparty. Is it enforceable? Is it tight enough? That is the idea of legal risk. Section 6.4, risk management policies and procedures. This is more of the same. Just going into a little bit more detail. I wouldn't be too concerned about 6.4. Neither 6.5. A lot of this is common sense, senior management oversight of the risk management systems. And then we go into a little bit detail with regard to independent credit risk management, and that's dealt with section 6.6. And it continues that you should have adequate resources. And then 6.8, just a sort of administration point, looking at the progress of developing this new regime that I've already said is not yet in place. So it is highly unlikely to be examined. Section 7, ongoing requirements with regard to the systems you have in place, the risk reduction techniques. I talked about those a moment ago, and we have more on them on a number of bullet points, and there's a bit of repetition there, but appreciate the risk reduction techniques that can be employed. And then just expanding on the concept of valuations and exposures, you should be aware of the valuation of your derivative positions and the potential exposures you have so that you can manage the risk appropriately. And remember, last bullet point under section 7.3, value at risk models. That is a technique for the management of market risk, not credit risk, not liquidity risk, but market risk. And they can sometimes throw that into a question to see how you deal with it. And finally, financial performance with regard to OTC derivatives should be monitored on a continuing basis. Again, nothing too demanding there. The last section in topic 6, conduct requirements in relation to OTC derivative transactions. So now we're introducing the idea of code of conduct and how you should be conducting yourself. Have a quick read through it, but I'm just not going to, I'm not too concerned about that. They have yet to go in and examine that in any detail. Now remember, topic 6, technical, there are areas that they're almost guaranteed to examine. The participants, the different types of participants, the clearing participants, the definitions of call and put, the European style, the American style, the clearing and settlement procedures, the use of DCAS and CCAS when you're exercising options. And then with regard to OTC derivatives, I'd be aware that the two risks that arise that don't exist to the same extent with exchange traded options, market risk and credit risk, both of which should be independently managed. Okay, so that brings us to the end of topic 6. And once again, I would recommend that you supplement the material that we've covered with question practice, which can be found on Examinator.online.